Mr. Rodriguez went to get Mr. Cox.
Okay.
Apologize. I can proceed without Mr. Cox.
Okay. And back to the plaintiffs, anything further?
Plaintiffs have no further witnesses, Your Honor. We just wanted to confirm before arresting our case in chief that plaintiff's exhibit 176 was admitted.
Yes, it was.
Great. Okay. In that case, plaintiff's rest, that case in chief.
Tell me again what 176 was.
It's the excerpts from the Karen Brinson Bell deposition that the parties agreed last night would be admitted
Okay.
in lieu of her additional live testimony.
I have a copy of that.
None of you have copies of that? Oh, we're going to solve that problem right
I
now.
have the pages and lines that the part that's being stipulated to, but I did not have that. It wasn't clear from my notes whether that was designated as 176. So that. And then the Shaw deposition is 175. Is that right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Correct.
You have a copy of that?
I do.
And I understand we're a couple copies short. They're on their way, and we'll give them after the lunch break. We'll make sure that you get copies of them, of course.
176.
There you go.
175. All right. So the plaintiff is resting.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Steve? Or we should go ahead?
Yeah, I'm fine to proceed, Your Honor.
Okay.
Yes, the state calls Deputy Director Maggie Brewer of DPS.
Bird, come around, please. If you would go ahead there, the center seat there, there's an X. It's kind of hard to see. I think it's an update. If you would raise your right hand to be affirmed by the clerk, please.
solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and this is your solemn affirmation.
Affirm. Deputy Hedgepeth's going to give you the lavalier mic there and.
That's fine.
Okay.
Get hold of it.
Okay. And if you are comfortable removing your mask, it is easier for us to hear your testimony with that off. If you're not comfortable, you're welcome to leave it on. As the attorneys ask their questions, I need you to answer it speaking slowly and clearly and keep your voice up. The microphone's been going in and out just a bit. If you are asked a question to which there is a yes or no answer, please answer out loud with yes or no. And if you please let them finish their entire question before you start answering. Okay. Mr. Steve, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Could you please tell us your full name for the record?
Margaret Norris Berger,
And what is your current job title?
Deputy Director for Community Corrections.
And is that with the Department of Public Safety?
Yes, sir.
And please tell us about your work history with the North Carolina Department of Public Safety.
Yes, sir. I began employment with the department on November 12th of 1996. I worked at Central Prison as a case manager, and a year later transferred to Polk Youth Institution and worked in the Diagnostic Center. In 1998, I transferred to Wake County as a probation and parole officer. Remained in that position until 2004 when I was promoted to Chief Probation and Parole Officer in Wake County. And in 2008, I became the Judicial District Manager for Wake County Probation. 2014, I became the Assistant Division Administrator for Community Corrections. And in 2018, I was promoted to Deputy Director of Community Corrections, my current role.
Could you just give us a brief description of your current role?
Sure. Oversight of administration predominantly, so it would include policy administration, post-release supervision office liaison with the Post-Release and Parole Commission, sex offender management, any of our OPUS, Offender Population Unified System management updates and automations, and our basic and in-service training curriculum, and anything field-related that overlaps with those different programs I'm involved with, as well as other duties assigned.
Could you please give us an overview of the types of supervision that are administered by the Community Corrections Division?
Sure. We are charged by the court with overseeing probation offenders who are placed under supervision by the court. And then we also supervise post-release offenders that are placed on post-release supervision by the Post-Release and Parole Commission, and also parole offenders who are sentenced under fair sentencing, who are placed under supervision in the community. And we also supervise offenders through the interstate compact from other states who have been sentenced in another state but actually reside in the state of North Carolina.
Could you tell us a little bit more about that last category?
Sure. If an offender is convicted in another state and they meet the guidelines for transfer and they live in North Carolina, then they are transferred here for supervision purposes. The sending state, the conviction state, retains all of their jurisdiction. We report all violations back to that state, and they make decisions on any type of sanctioning or completions or revocations. We are just a courtesy agent for those offenders that are living here in North Carolina but sentenced out of state.
All right. Generally, can you describe for the court the interactions and conversations that probation and parole officers would have with a typical individual regarding their voting rights while they're under supervision? And let's be clear, let's start with probation.
Yes, sir. When an offender is placed on probation by the court, they meet with a probation officer. Initially, in the first month, they meet 3 different times. During those meetings, we discuss the 2 different times we discuss the DCC 117, which is the regular conditions of probation. And there's a section on, I believe it's page 2, where it specifically states that if they are a convicted felon, that they have forfeited their right to vote while they are under supervision. They do initial that if they are a convicted felon, and then they sign at the bottom of the page. We also have a brochure that was developed by our agency, and it's successfully completing probation. And on page 2, the voting right forfeiture is also addressed there, and we read that brochure to the offender, and they are provided a copy. And that is at the beginning of supervision, occurring as soon as possible after they're placed under supervision. It's explained to them that if they were registered to vote, that they are now removed from the system as being eligible to vote. And on the 117, it also mentions that their rights will be restored after the completion of their supervision. And then at the end of probation, if they are successfully completed, there's what we call a DCC 15. And on that form, it states that their rights to vote have been automatically restored. We also provide them with a copy of a form that explains that their rights have been restored, and give them a voter registration form as well. The other means of ending or completing a probation case is through termination by the court. And with the modification order, we provide them with a DCC 13, which is in essence the same as the 15, restoration of rights, but it's done in companion with the modification from the court. And we also provide them with the voter registration information that their rights have been restored, along with the voter registration form.
Okay. If I may approach the witness with our exhibit book.
You may.
Deputy Director, we have some of those documents you talked about in this, and I'd like to just run through them with you. This is tabbed for all of our exhibits, so a lot of them are not relevant, but I'll direct you to the tab we need. The first one would be tab 28. Is that the document you were talking about that goes to probationers at the beginning of their term?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I don't have a copy of these documents, and there was no mention of any exhibit number, so I don't know how to find it in there.
Sorry, 28? You don't have
Is
the
it
bar?
local?
Is it legislative oh,
It's
State Board
plaintiff.
Defendant is 28?
Sorry, that wasn't clear.
Okay,
You need a moment to get there.
just one moment.
Yeah, the tabs correspond to the exhibit numbers.
Okay,
Unless
thank
I
you.
messed it up.
Go ahead.
We're good? Okay. Sorry, just to repeat the question, it was, you mentioned that during probation, there's an in-person meeting at the beginning, and I believe you said that the regular conditions of probation is one of the documents that given to them.
Yes, sir.
Is this the document you were referring to?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you mentioned that on page 2, it discusses voting rights.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that section is at the bottom quarter,
Yes, sir.
the very last thing really before they sign?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then I'll have you turn to document 36. So it's Plaintiff Exhibit 36. Do you have it?
Yes.
Okay.
Did you say Plaintiff's Exhibit 36?
I apologize. State Exhibit 36. Do you see that document?
It's mailing addresses of county board offices.
The other side? No, you might be missing the document. Sorry. If I can approach it, Honor. I don't need to see it. You have it before you?
Yes, sir.
I believe you mentioned earlier that a voter registration form is handed to them at completion.
Correct.
Is this the registration form that they would receive?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then next, I will take you to State Exhibit 30, which I'm also going to have. Do you see that document?
Yes, sir.
And I believe you mentioned earlier that DCC 15, final discharge, is also given.
Yes, sir.
Is that document?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's okay. If you could look at State's Exhibit 33. Okay, I don't think you actually mentioned this one by name, by title, but I think you mentioned that you give them information. Is this what you were referring to?
Yes, sir.
And what is this document called?
Notice concerning restoration of voting rights.
Okay. And that also informs them about the restoration of their voting rights, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the last one you referenced was State's Exhibit 29, if you could turn to that. And what is that document?
This is the DCC 13 that I stated accompanied the court order if they were terminated by a judge early or unsuccessfully. It's the certificate for restoration of rights.
And that was actually very similar to the DCC 15.
Yes, sir.
The distinction being one is by the PPO, the other one's by the court.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that was all for probation. Could you just run us through the interactions that someone on post-release supervision or parole, having come out from incarceration, would have with their PPO through that process to completion?
When an offender is released on post-release supervision or parole, they release from DOC with a transitional document envelope. And in that transitional document envelope is the Know Your Rights brochure from the State Board of Elections. It's given to the offender prior to their release. The officer goes through the TDE, which is the transitional document envelope, and also in that initial meeting, we cover the same brochure as the probation, but it's called Completing Post-Release and Parole Successfully. And on page 2 of that document, their right to vote forfeiture is outlined at the bottom. And then when they complete supervision, that's a set amount of time, and it's an unconditional discharge certificate is received from the Post-Release and Parole Commission. And we give that to the offender along with that notice of restoration of rights form and the voter registration form.
Okay, now you referenced those two again. That was State's Exhibit 33. Was that one of the documents you just referenced?
Yes, sir.
And then also the voter registration form, obviously, that's another one, that's State's Exhibit 36.
Yes, sir.
There's a State's Exhibit 31, could you go to that one? Could you tell us what that is?
This is an example of a certificate of unconditional discharge.
Is that, sorry, go ahead.
That's given to post-release offenders and parole offenders once they complete their supervision period.
Okay, and I'll just represent to you that earlier today, we heard from one of the individual plaintiffs in this case, and he was on post-release supervision, and he testified that when he completed his term of post-release supervision, he was not provided with any voting rights information. Would that, if that occurred, as he said it did, would that be in compliance with TPS policy?
No, sir.
And would you consider that to be a mistake by the parole officer?
Absolutely.
And what would be your response if that came to your attention?
We would have the chief probation officer, their supervisor, sit down and do some refresher training with them and cover that policy to ensure that they understand that the documents must be forwarded to the offender, either in person at the last meeting, or if it's after term date, then they could be mailed, but that it is required that they are given those forms along with their unconditional discharge.
Okay. If I could just have 1 minute.
May I have a question? State Defendants Exhibit 31, who is that provided to? Or is that just internal record keeping
No, it's provided to the offender.
to the offender?
Yes, ma'am. And we keep a copy in our file.
Deputy Director, have these policies for how termination and completion happens, have these policies changed in the last 5 years?
In the last 5 years, have the procedures of giving these documents changed? No.
Okay.
Oh, well, it's 2001, I'm sorry. We made some changes in 2017 as it relates to the 117 because of some law changes, but not in respect to the voter registration.
Okay.
I believe it was the extradition document where they waive extradition if they're a felon.
One. You mentioned, I'm sorry, did you mention the DCC 117?
Yes.
Okay, and what did you say was changed about that?
That was revised in 18, and I don't remember the reasons for all the revisions. I believe in 17 there was a law change where we had to, AOC and DAC or DPS had to develop a way of notifying offenders that their rights were restored. In addition to this, we were directed to provide them with documents, and that's where we came up with the notice to restore registration of rights and giving them the voter registration form. So I wanted to correct that. That was within the last 5 years. That was 2017.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Jones, will you be doing cross for the plan?
I'll be doing cross for the plan.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Brewer. I'm Stanton Jones. I represent the plaintiffs in this case. And I'll have some questions for you this morning. Is it fair to say that you are the DPS official who's primarily responsible for the population of people with felony convictions on probation, parole, or post-release supervision?
I report to the director.
Thumbs up, please.
I would say that the director is responsible, but I do report directly to him. So yes, I would say that responsibility falls under me.
Okay, great. And your primary job responsibilities at the Department of Public Safety relate to people who are on probation, parole, or post-release supervision?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you aware that it is a felony offense for a person with a felony conviction to vote before their voting rights have been restored?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you know the punishment for this crime of voting?
I do not.
I'll represent to you that it's up to 2 years in prison. Is that something that was familiar to you before?
No, sir.
Okay. That's a significant punishment for voting when you weren't supposed to, right?
It's the law. I would say it's a punishment.
And are you aware that a person's voting rights are not restored until they complete both any term of incarceration as well as any probation, parole, or post-release supervision?
Yes, sir.
So as long as a person is on probation, parole, or post-release supervision, they're not allowed to vote?
Up until last fall, that would be an accurate answer. But due to the injunction from this court, we modified that if they were extended for monies only, then their right to vote was restored at that time.
Okay, thank you for that helpful clarification. For now, I'd just like to set aside the court's injunction and that population of people who may have voting rights under the injunction. Setting the injunction aside, in general, and before the injunction, people on probation, post-release supervision, and parole are not permitted to vote. That's your understanding?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And all of those people on probation, parole, post-release supervision are living in the community. They're not incarcerated.
They could be incarcerated during a period of their supervision, but yes, in general, they're out in the community living.
Okay. Are you referring to people on special probation or weekend jail?
Or CRVs, confinement in response to violations, quick dips, those type of active sentences.
Okay, and I'll have a few questions for you about those later, but setting aside weekend jail and the other situations that you just described, in general, other people on probation, parole, or post-release supervision are living in the community. They're not incarcerated.
Yes, sir.
So, unlike incarcerated people who are in prison, individuals living in the community on probation, parole, or post-release supervision they're physically able to get to a polling place in an election, subject to having some transportation, right?
Yes.
And is it your understanding that a person on probation, parole, or post-release supervision who gets it wrong and votes when they weren't supposed to can be prosecuted and convicted of a felony and sentenced to the 2-year prison term that I represented?
Yes.
So in light of that, would you agree that it's critically important that the state inform people on probation, post-release, or supervision or parole explicitly and clearly and in plain English of the rules governing their ability to vote or prohibition on voting?
Yes, sir.
So you agree that any forms that are provided to people living in the community on probation, parole, or post-release supervision describing the status of a person's voting rights should be explicit about what the rules are, clear as to what the rules are, and should speak in plain English so that the forms can be understood?
Yes, sir.
Would you also agree that it's very important, especially in light of the significant punishment for getting this wrong and voting by accident, it's important to confirm that individuals on probation, parole, or post-release supervision have received, read, and clearly understood any written materials about their voting rights?
Yes, sir.
The Department of Public Safety, in addition to actually working directly with impacted individuals on some form of supervision, also works or interacts with the State Board of Elections with respect to voting rights of people with felony convictions. Is that right?
Can
Objection.
you,
Your Honors, I believe this is outside the relevance and the scope of the trial to the extent that it's headed towards as-applied challenges, and none of the testimony that we brought forward or submitted had anything to do with our interaction with the state board. It was about simply informing the court with the forms, the documents and the forms that are provided to offenders during that process. To rebut the information that was brought out on plaintiff's case, where they claim that there was confusion or lack of clarity from the expert, discussed lack of clarity, so we wanted that objective evidence, the forms themselves, before the court so they could judge for themselves.
Your Honor, her entire direct testimony was all about the role that DPS plays in North Carolina's election and voting. And so I'm asking her questions that just further relate to DPS's role in connection with voting or not voting by this population of people on supervision.
Can you repeat the question before we roll on the objection? Please?
Sure. The simple question is just, does the Department of Public Safety interact or work with the State Board of Elections concerning the voting rights of people with felony convictions?
Objections overruled. You may answer, ma'am.
The interaction that takes place with the State Board of Elections is through a feed. It's an electronic feed that it's my understanding, I don't work for the department that, the section that submits that feed, but it's a nightly feed. And it provides information for all offenders that are placed under supervision for a felony. And as a person completes supervision, of course, that nightly feed comes in and it removes them from the list. That is the extent of our contact with the State Board of Elections.
Okay, so on a nightly basis, DPS provides information to the State Board of Elections electronically about people with felony convictions who either are or were on probation, parole, or post-release supervision?
Yes.
And do you understand that the State Board of Elections uses the information received from DPS to determine which people with felony convictions are and are not able to vote in elections?
I don't know how that information is used, but yes, I mean, we do get calls. I get calls often asking for clarification. So I would assume that, yes, your statement is correct.
Okay. You're generally aware that under the rules that we talked about earlier, that this population of people living in the community on supervision can't vote. The State Board of Elections needs to have a way to figure out who those people are, right?
Yes, sir.
And the State Board of Elections, to do that, uses the information that DPS provides through the nightly feed.
I assume yes.
Okay. So would you agree with me then that it's very important, especially in light of the felony criminal penalties and imprisonment that can occur if anyone gets this wrong? It's very important for DPS and the State Board of Elections to communicate in clear, consistent terms about the voting rights of people with felony convictions?
Yes, sir.
If there were any talking past each other between DPS and the State Board of Elections, or confusion about what various terms mean, it could result in an error and the State Board not having accurate information about who can and can't vote, right?
Yes.
Okay. Can we pull up State Board Defendants Exhibit 28? Your Honor, can we turn on the screen? Yes. Thank you. And this is State Defendants Exhibit 28 is also in your binder there. It looks like you flipped to it.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Your Honor, honors all have it in front of you, I'm happy to proceed and hopefully we can get it up on the screen.
I do, I have it in front of me, and, right, we all three have it, it's just gonna take a moment for the screen to warm up.
That's fine.
If you'd
We'll
like
move
to proceed,
forward.
that's fine.
Okay, Ms. Brewers, State Defendant's Exhibit 28 is a copy of the DCC 117 form that you testified about on direct examination, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I believe you testified that this is a form that is provided to all people who are entering a period of probation following a conviction, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And is that just people with a felony conviction, or would that also include people entering a term of probation for a misdemeanor conviction?
Yes, sir. It would include anyone that's placed under supervision for probation.
And that would include people who are convicted of felonies and also people who are only convicted of misdemeanors, right?
Yes.
Is this form provided to anyone else other than people who are entering a term of probation for a felony or misdemeanor conviction?
No, sir.
And remind me, who gives this form to the individuals?
The probation officer.
Okay. So I'd like to just go through and have you explain what this form is informing people. If you start at the top of the first page where it says, all defendants placed on supervised probation shall, and then there's a list of bullets. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
Am I right that that's a list of things that people on probation either are or are not allowed to do during their probation, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the first bullet says that they're not supposed to commit any crimes anywhere, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The second bullet says that they're not allowed to possess any guns or explosives or other deadly weapons, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The third bullet says that they're supposed to remain employed, right?
Yes, sir.
They're supposed to satisfy child support and family obligations as required by the court, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then there's a few more bullets. I won't read all of them. The last one says that they're supposed to pay a supervision fee and a bunch of other types of money. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You can take a look. Is there any mention of voting in this list of things that people on probation are and are not allowed to do during their probation?
Not in this section, no.
Okay. Let's take a look at the next section. It says, for offenses committed on or after December 1st, 2009, the defendant shall also, and then there's another list of bullets. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that's, do you know the significance of that date, December 1st, 2009?
It was part of the law changes after, I do not believe that's justice reinvestment, that was 2011. It was just a general statute change, and it was for offenses committed on or after December 1st of 2009.
Okay. And in this list of things that people on probation are and are not allowed to do, the first one there says that they're required to submit to warrantless searches by a probation officer, right?
Yes, sir.
The second one says they also have to submit to warrantless searches by the police, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Jones, I think we have it in front of us, and I would say the only place that voting rights are referenced is in the very last section on the second page. And we can see that. So
Okay,
you don't
great.
need to go through all the rest of it with
Got it.
everywhere.
Okay, so we'll just all agree, there's no mention of voting in any of these 5 different lists of things that people on probation are or not allowed to do. The first mention of voting on this form is in a different paragraph at the end, right above where the person signs, right?
Yes.
Okay. I did want to call your attention to, if you could turn to the second page before we get to the paragraph about voting. I did have another question about something here. So the second heading there says, if the defendant is to serve an active sentence as a condition of special probation, the defendant shall also, and then it has the term, and then at the end of that little second bullet, it refers to an active term of imprisonment. Do you see that?
Yes.
What's your understanding of an active sentence in that context?
It's referring to special probation, which could be weekend, 2 days at a time. It could be a consecutive amount of time, depending on their suspended sentence. It would depend on how many days. To me, it's any time that they're in an incarcerated state
Okay.
under special probation.
Okay. So the active sentence there just means incarceration?
While serving a condition of
Special probation, yes.
Okay. Okay. Now let's go down below the lines for county and file numbers to that paragraph that does first mention voting on this form. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And it says, if you're convicted of a felony in North Carolina, you forfeit your citizenship rights, including the right to vote. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
It tells them that if they were registered before the conviction, the registration's canceled, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then there's a sentence that says, however, upon completion of your sentence, your voting rights are restored. Is that reference to the sentence the same as the active sentence that was described earlier on the same page of this document?
No, sir.
It's a different kind of sentence?
Yes, sir.
What kind of sentence is this one?
Probation sentence, the actual probation term.
Okay. Does it say, does this paragraph about voting use the word probation?
Not explicitly in that paragraph, no.
So this paragraph about voting doesn't use the word probation?
Not in that paragraph, no, sir.
Okay. And it refers to getting your voting rights back after you've completed your sentence, that sentence is different than the sentence that's described earlier on the page, which refers to incarceration, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How's someone supposed to know that?
This document is regular conditions of probation, and it goes into other detail related to their particular offense. So this is concerning probation offenders and their term.
and it would be explained to them by their probation officer, and plus the judge would have
Ordered them to probation in open court. And this document is for probationers under supervision.
So are probation officers directed, or does DPS have a policy directing probation officers to explain to people on probation receiving this form that the reference to a sentence in the paragraph about getting your voting rights back is different than the type of active sentence that's referred to earlier on this page and is the only other reference to a sentence in this document to tell them that the second sentence means probation?
We do not have a policy that states that.
Do you think that this form would be clearer to a person if that sentence instead read, however, upon completion of your probation, your voting rights are restored?
Objection. Calls for speculation. I think it's pretty far outside.
Full rule.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. My question is, do you believe that this form would be clearer if that sentence that we've been talking about instead read, however, upon completion of your probation, your voting rights are restored?
No, sir, it reads clear to me.
Okay. Okay, so you don't think that this would be clearer to a person who's serving probation if you just used the word probation rather than the word sentence?
To me, it does not. You're asking me. No, this is very clear to me.
To you as a person who's spent decades working as a probation officer and case manager and the deputy director for community supervision at the Department of Public Safety, it's very clear to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then the next paragraph in italics there just tells people that if they get this wrong and vote when they weren't supposed to, they've committed a crime, and it cites the criminal statute. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to show you Plaintiff's Exhibit 42. There should be another set of larger binders up there somewhere that are marked Plaintiff's Trial Exhibits. If you could get Volume 1. Plaintiff's Exhibit 42, if you could flip to that one, please. Okay. This is a document that was produced by the State Board of Elections. To us, in this case, it's titled Election Technology Training Topic Felony Processes, and it's dated June 2017. See that?
Yes, sir.
Have you seen this document before?
No, sir.
Okay. I'm only going to show you one page of it and just have a couple quick questions. Can you flip to the page that has the little Bates number at the bottom right ending in 286?
Objection, Your Honor. Foundation.
286 refers to the lists that were previously testified to, so.
Withdrawn, sorry.
Thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm supposed to consult with them before ruling, and I just got there.
You took the words right out of my mouth. Thank you, Your Honor. Okay, so this page is titled DOC Felon Reports Updated, and you would understand in this context, DOC refers to, well, what would you take that to refer to?
The new Department of
Adult Corrections and Juvenile Justice.
Okay, good, that's what I thought. And it starts by saying that the DOC felon reports in the county reports on the intranet have been updated. You see that?
Yes, sir.
And then there is a list of different lists: felon county list, felon state matching list, felon completed list, and felon completed state matching list, and DOC felon search. And you're welcome to take a minute to read them if you want to familiarize yourself. I will just represent to you the State Board of Elections witness has testified that this is a list. These are various lists of people with felony convictions that the State Board compiles based on information provided by DPS about the ability to vote of people with felony convictions. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. If you look on the first bullet there, it says felon county list, and it's described as a daily report that shows the current list of persons who have an active felony status due to a conviction of a felony in a North Carolina state court. You testified earlier that an active sentence, that means incarceration, right?
No, sir. That's an active sentence, active term of imprisonment. This is just saying active.
Okay, what's the difference?
An active sentence, and I can't interpret SBE's technology guide, but for me, if I read active felony status, I would say that they're currently under supervision in probation or post-release for a felony. But once again, this is not my document, so I'm not sure what their intent was here.
Okay. But you think that they're probably using active here in a different way than the DPS document used active to refer to an active sentence of incarceration?
I don't know.
Okay. Can we, you can put that one away, thank you. If you could go back to the binder of the state board, that's in your binder of state board exhibits, and turn to exhibit 20, State Board Defendants Exhibit 29. Exhibit 29 and State Defendants Exhibit 30 are appear to be similar versions of a form. Can you just remind me what are those two?
The DCC 13 is accompanied with a court order where the case is terminated, or in could be moved to unsupervised, those type of things. And then the DCC 15 is where the probation officer, it completes successfully and it doesn't go before the court. So they both, in essence, restore their rights, give them their restoration of rights documentation.
So both of these forms are supposed to be given to people who are completing their, is it their probation, parole, or post-release supervision and getting their rights back?
No, sir, they don't get both.
They would get one or the other?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the only difference is whether they go before a court in connection with completing their supervision or probation or parole?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So, am I right that this form, whichever one of the two forms the person gets, would be provided to them as part of a packet of written materials?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how many different documents are there, if you know, in that packet?
If they are terminated by the court, there would be a modification order along with this DCC 13, the notice of restoration of rights, and the voter registration form. And if they're successfully completed by the probation officer, they didn't have to go in front of the court, then they're given the DCC 15, the restoration of rights notice, and the voter registration form. So it would be 4 pieces of paper and 3 pieces of paper.
Are there any other documents provided at this time to people who are finishing their, anything other than these documents related to voting?
No, sir.
I need to ask for clarification, if I heard correctly. Ms. Brewer, did you say that if the probationer is transferred to unsupervised probation, DCC 13 or DCC 15 would be provided?
It would be a 13 that would go with them. If they're unsupervised, I believe they have to, actually, I apologize, I may have said that incorrectly, they would get their rights back, I believe, from the clerk. They would go back and fill out a form with them. We would give them just the modification order in that case if they were unsupervised, and then once they reached the end of their term, they would petition back to the clerk, is my understanding. We don't supervise unsupervised.
So that's where I was asking for clarification.
Right, I misspoke, I apologize.
So they're not provided this form telling them they've got the right to vote if they're transferred to unsupervised probation?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Are people on unsupervised probation allowed to vote?
We don't supervise unsupervised, I can't speak to that.
You don't know whether people on unsupervised probation are allowed to vote?
No, sir.
Okay, this form says there's a space for filling in some information about the name of the judge and the court and the date. Do you see those?
Yes.
Okay, and then below that, in all caps, it says, "Now, therefore, the Department of Public Safety hereby confirms the above individual's supervision period has ended," right?
Correct.
That's pretty clear. Their supervision period has ended, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then it says, "For convicted felons only, restoration of rights," and below that, there's a single paragraph that has 2 sentences. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
Am I right that the first sentence talks about voting and guns?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And it talks about voting, your voting rights and your gun rights together in a single sentence?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And it tells people that all of their citizenship rights were forfeited on their conviction, including the right to vote. Those rights are automatically restored, except the right to have a gun or any other weapon of destruction.
Yes, sir.
Okay. There's no sentence on this form that is just specific to the restoration of your voting rights, correct?
There's not one sentence directly devoted to the restoration of rights, no.
Okay. And so the way this works, if I understand this sentence correctly, citizenship rights includes both voting rights and gun rights, and when you complete your supervision, it's saying you get all your citizenship rights back, including your voting rights, except not your gun rights. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Does that seem like clear, simple English explaining to a person finishing their supervision that you are now allowed to vote?
Yes.
Do you think it would be clearer to people finishing probation if this form just included a simple statement in plain English? Because you have completed your supervision, you are now allowed to vote?
It could be modified to that, yes.
Do you think that that would be clearer than this first sentence that says that all of your citizenship rights were forfeited on conviction and that included your right to vote, and now you're getting all your citizenship rights back except your gun rights?
It reads clear to me.
This version reads equally clear to you about voting rights as a simple statement that because you have now completed supervision, you are allowed to vote?
Yes.
Okay. And can we just look very quickly at Exhibit 30, just to confirm the text that we were describing with the instruction about citizenship rights and voting rights and gun rights. The text is the same on both state defendants exhibits 29 and 30.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can we look at State Defendants Exhibit 31 now? This is a form, this is one of the documents you test about on direct examination, right?
Yes, sir.
And can you just remind me what's the context for this one?
This is for post-release and parole offenders when they complete their term of supervision.
Okay, so it's in some sense similar to the two that we just looked at, but those ones were for people coming off of probation, and this one is for people coming off of parole or post-release supervision?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And this one also is designed to inform people about their rights,
Yes, sir.
the restoration of their rights?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Does this form use the word vote or voter or voting or any iteration of the word vote?
No, sir.
It doesn't. This form that's designed to inform people about the restoration of their rights does not use any iteration of the word vote at all.
No, sir.
Before we get into any of the specifics, do you think that it would be clearer and help people coming off of their parole or post-release supervision understand the restoration of their voting rights if this form used the word vote to tell them they can vote?
Yes.
We are actually past our lunch stopping point. So Brett, hoping that this would be finished so that Ms. Brewer didn't have to return after lunch. But I don't know how close you are.
I might have, it's possible I have 10 minutes. I actually think that I have like 5 minutes, but I've doubled it for Judge Gregory's benefit.
You all weren't privy to the conversation back there and Judge Gregory's skepticism about time estimates. So, so we are going to recess for lunch. And we will come back. We're going to give us until 1:35 so that we have the full hour for lunch. And I don't know if the folks that I'd asked earlier, the plaintiff's witnesses, are able to return after lunch, or do all of you need to leave? And I actually would include Mr. Locklear on that. Mr. Locklear, Reverend Spearman, Mr. Gaddy, Mr. Purdy, are you all able to be back after lunch?
Yes.
Okay. 1:35. We'll recess.
Fair question, as a recess, we'll go 1:35 p.m.
Your Honor, I know
Yes, sir.
we already recessed. I was just going to ask about sequencing this afternoon. Do we need to go back in or I just wanted to know whether, if you wanted to address the issues we spoke about in
Yes.
chambers before we get to closings or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
So essentially immediately after the witness session?
yes. Were you all able to reach?
I think we'll have somebody here at that point, yes.